Hi, everybody. This is Randy Weingarten. I was trying to figure out as we were waiting how many of these town halls we have done in the last since COVID started. And I think this is the 68th town hall. And so the first thing I want to say actually is what I would say at the end, which is it's been a hard day. I mean, Abby was at Sandy Hook 9 years ago. Still teaches in Newtown, and she's with us today. It's a hard day yesterday and today. Fred Gutenberg, as all of you know, lost his daughter Jamie in the Parkland tragedy. Every time something happens, like Oxford or the shooting there, it triggers and re-triggers in so many different ways. I'm so honored that Fred is here with us. And we were just talking before I got to see Fred's mom when I was in Cincinnati this week. And we talked about Jamie and we talked about the things that are so important in life. And speaking of things that are so important in life, we have Destiny Holly here, who's an 11th grade student activist from Philly. And Philly has seen its share of violence this year in the streets and in shootings. And Jerry Jordan, our president in Philadelphia, our last speaker, Jerry and Destiny have been fighting their hearts and souls out to try to fight against gun violence and to try to get common sense gun measures in, as has Fred and as has Abby. But we decided to have this town hall. This is not the first town hall we've done about preventing gun violence. And it's not going to be, I mean, it would be nice if I could say to all of you, this would be the last. We've done it. We finished. We got it done. But, with the filibuster rules in the Senate, with the National Rifle Association, with all of the fear that has happened in the United States, with a sense of growing anti-democratic forces and growing vigilantism, as well as this, the malaise that we see and feel in the country. We would argue, I think all of us, that gun violence is getting worse, not better. And that the number of people who have guns that ought not have guns is getting worse, not better. And ultimately, this is a crisis that literally virtually every other country in the world has solved. Places that have tremendous volatility all the time, like Israel and Palestine, they have solved this. All throughout Europe, they have solved this. Why is it in America we can't solve this? And so we're going to keep at it. We're going to keep at it each and every day. But we wanted to have this and really have people, our friends, our allies, our community. That's who you see with Abby and Fred and Destiny and Jerry. We wanted to put a face on this. We wanted to say this has to be solved. We're the United States of America. And so that's why we're here today on this, the day after the 9th anniversary of the terrible, tragic, horrible, rip your guts out shooting in Sandy Hook. And 2 weeks after the terrible, tragic, rip your heart out shooting in Oxford, Michigan. We can be better, America. And we, as educators and as student activists and as parents, we have to be together to try to fight this and to create that kind of blanket of comfort and consolation or consoling each other, and that kind of sense of wrapping ourselves with each other in terms of who we are to each other and how we help console each other and how we help have each other's back. I should say just very quickly, um, I could go on and on about, the that 27,000 students on K-12 campuses across 22 states were exposed to gun violence in 2021. I could, talk on and on about, the depths of this tragedy. And we will, as we go, as I introduce the amazing panelists. I do want to say we're also trying to get that Build Back Better bill over the finish line. That bill has a lot of things in it. It actually invests $5 billion over 8 years to support successful community violence intervention programs that are critical to reducing gun violence. It also has money to train at-risk individuals for jobs, providing services. But what it also does, that bill, as well as the fight for voting rights, is that all of these things solve problems. And in the aftermath of COVID, there's lots of different problems that people have. We have many public health epidemics. Gun violence is one of them. The virus is another of them. And many of us, in terms of America, really believe we have a responsibility to each other to solve these problems, to make sure that the streets and our schools are safe and welcoming for all, regardless of who we are, where we live, our skin color, our sexuality. We have an obligation as teachers, as trade unionists, as workers, as people in the beloved community to actually try and fight this and have a welcoming and safe community for all. So there's lots of stuff that's going on today. There's lots of stuff we have to deal with. There's lots of things we've done. AFT has worked with Everytown and NEA and so many of the other gun violence groups. We've worked with students. We released a report last year, for example, with Everytown, including one more time a bunch of common sense measures, including passing red flag laws so that law enforcement and family members can act on warning signs of violence and intervene in those high-risk situations, frankly, which some of the teachers did in Oxford, Michigan, but it wasn't enough. Raising the age to purchase semi-automatic firearms to 21 to prevent minors from getting their hands on guns easily. Obviously, requiring background checks on gun sales so that people exhibiting warning signs, as well as minors, requiring background checks for minors so that we keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them in the first place, and all of the firearm storage laws. All of these things have lots of support. We all know that. Everybody who's watching this Facebook Live would actually say the same thing as I do. There's overwhelming support. We know that. But the rules of the Senate are broken, and we can't get these bills through the Senate, just like the rules of the Senate are broken, and we can't get voting rights at this moment through the Senate, knowing full well that a voting rights and an election protection measure will save our democracy. And glimmer of hope, last week, rule of the Senate was changed. We need those rules was changed to increase the debt ceiling. If it can be changed for economic reasons, as important as those economic reasons are, it frankly needs to be changed for this public health emergency. People's lives, really important. The democracy, really important. So if it can be changed for Wall Street and for making sure that we don't go into default, then we should be able to change it for these other reasons. And those are the things that many of us are doing over and over again. So instead of me going further, I really want to introduce a panel. I've introduced them a little bit, but I want them to speak from their firsthand knowledge. And ultimately, what I'm asking everybody to do who's watching this, don't give up. We have to solve this. It's our responsibility to each other and to the kids and teachers and people on the streets that we will save from senseless, horrible gun violence. Our kids, our parents, people we love. We can't give up. We have to continue to fight for sensible gun violence laws. And so, first, let me introduce Philadelphia Federation of Teachers President Jerry Jordan, who represents educators and school staffs across Philly. And after a 14-year-old boy died from gun violence recently in Philly, Jerry said, and I quote, "I have lived in and loved this city for my entire life. This level of persistent loss against the backdrop of a deadly pandemic is too much to bear. It should shake all of us up to our core. It should spur all of us to meaningful collective action." So, Jerry, why don't you start us off today? Talk about the resources our schools in need or anything else you'd like to talk about today.
Good evening, and I'm Jerry Jordan, and thank you, Randy, for this important town hall this evening. But let me say this. The fact that this town hall is necessary should upset all of us, because it means that as a society, we still haven't gotten it right. We still have shirked our collective responsibility to protect our children, our neighbors, and our communities. I'm joined today with some really remarkable advocates and people, each of whom has experienced tragedies that I wish I could say were unthinkable. But the fact is, what they have endured is not unthinkable in our society because we have allowed it. To my co-panelists, Abby, Fred, and my fellow Philadelphian Destiny, I'm honored to be here with you, but I wish it weren't necessary. I'd like to talk for a couple of minutes about the gun violence crisis that is tormenting my beloved city right now. I've lived in and loved Philadelphia my whole life. I graduated from West Philadelphia High School, and I've spent my career working towards a better, more equitable tomorrow. And what I've seen unfold this year it just simply breaks my heart. In 2021 alone, as of Monday, there have been 529 homicides. That number should shake every one of us to our core. In the last several weeks, here are just some of the lives that we have lost. Samir Jefferson, age 14, was waiting for the bus in broad daylight when he was shot 18 times. Kanye Davis, age 16, was ambushed and killed after being shot 8 times. Marcus Stokes, age 13, was walking to school and never arrived at his 7th grade classroom. Samuel Collington, age 21, was gunned down in an attempted robbery. Zykia Patterson, age 24, was walking with her young twins in broad daylight when she was gunned down. Jessica Covington, age 32, was 7 months pregnant and was returning home and unloading gifts from her baby shower when she was slain. And today, a 13-year-old child was shot. I don't have all the solutions, but I do know this. If we continue to reject our collective responsibility, we will continue to lose family, friends, students, and community members. And we also know this. We need more resources in schools. We need social emotional learning. We need social workers, and we need more counselors. These resources will not be a panacea, but we need a comprehensive community-based strategy to address the crises of violence and a key element of that must be equitable investment in public education. Thank you again, Randy, Destiny, Abby, and Fred, for your leadership in these days past and in the days ahead. Thank you,
Thank you,
Randy.
Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. And look, this is about saying their names and not letting people hide from the tragedy that happens with a combination of guns and all of the trauma and anxiety and everything else that people are through. And so it is really important to say their names and to feel for every family and every person whose life has been snuffed and taken from us. Um, and speaking about, families and lives taken from us, Fred, I don't know how you manage it. I don't know how you manage every day. I am so in awe of you. So, Fred Gutenberg is the activist behind Orange Ribbons for Gun Safety. As I um, said before, his 14-year-old daughter, Jamie, was killed at Stoneman Douglas High School, the shooting of February 14th, 2018. His son, Jesse, was also a student at the school, ran from the shooting, got out. But Fred has been not just dealing with this loss, this primal wound in his and his family's life, his wife's life, but he has spent every single day, I think, since February 14th, 2018, fighting for to get rid of this scourge of gun violence and for common sense gun prevention. And so I just can't thank you enough, Fred, for everything you're doing, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Randy, thank you. Um, I'm listening to you say that, and I'll just say this. Before it was my daughter and my son, I was silent. I wasn't speaking out. I wasn't speaking up. I wasn't trying to stop gun violence. I never thought it was going to happen to my family, um, but it did. And I can't ever be silent again. I can't stop doing what I'm doing because gun violence isn't stopping. This isn't going to solve itself. This isn't going to go away. This requires all hands on deck. It requires presidential leadership. It requires the leadership of other elected leaders. And it requires, probably even more importantly than that we all get out and vote. Because the reason we are in the position we are in today is because too many of us have failed to vote in the past. I had the good honor and good fortune of doing one of your town halls within the past year. And at the time, I told the teachers and other educators on the line, I consider you America's heroes, but I also consider you America's helpers. Because when these shootings happen, it is the schools, it is the education system that steps in, that becomes the glue of the community, that helps guide the kids through this, even though in many cases you've gone through it yourself. I will let you know, I have had conversation with the principal and the administrators at Oxford High School. And what really shook me to my core talking to them is that nothing has changed since Parkland. What shook me to my core before this conversation started tonight was the conversation I was having with Abby. It's 9 years since Sandy Hook, and nothing has changed. And these things aren't going to change themselves. And what makes it even worse, and when I was talking to the Oxford people, is the realization that every time this happens, there's still no good way to go forward. There's still no good way to deal with the emotional wreckage that this leaves on families and communities, because we've done nothing to stop this. And so that is why I refuse to be silent. In the hour that we are on this meeting today, approximately 4 people are going to be shot and killed. In the hour before it, approximately 4 people were shot and killed. In the hour after this, approximately 4 people will be shot and killed. During the day today, that likely happened in a school somewhere in America, or as a child was leaving the school somewhere in America. We're better than that. And this isn't rocket science to fix this. This doesn't take a whole lot of thought with regards to how do we reduce the gun violence death rate? How do we reduce the instances of gun violence? And how do we reduce the severity of gun violence injuries when they happen? You know, I tell people across the country all the time, I don't hate gun owners. I don't hate the Second Amendment. I hate gun violence. And I think most people, even gun owners, agree with that statement. And I think if we can step away from the awful political people who politicize a discussion like this into something other than what it is, which is an effort to save lives, I think we can find real common ground and agreement. But I will tell you, we have an election coming up in 22. If somebody would have told me after Jamie was killed, we'd have a president who supports gun safety measures. We'd have a House of Representatives that not only supports gun safety, but is actually passing gun safety. And we'd have a Senate that is 50-50, but with a Democratic majority leader. I would have told you no way all of that would have happened this quickly after that shooting. But it did. And in large part because Americans are tired of gun violence and they're voting for people who want to do something about it. Here's my fear. We don't get everything we want right away. And my fear is that if we don't have this completely solved, people will be demotivated from voting. Don't let that happen. This is the most important election of our lifetime, and I'm going to tell you why. We are closer than we have ever been, for the reasons I just laid out, to passing gun safety legislation. And the truth is, you can make that argument for most issues that you would agree with. We are also closer than we've ever been to losing the chance to do so. If we don't vote, if the House flips back to a party that doesn't want to do anything about this, if we don't hold a majority in the Senate and increase it, we run the risk of never being able to do anything about this issue. It took a lot of years and a lot of elections where not enough people voted to put us in this place. This will be our third election cycle since Parkland. We can do this, but we have to keep motivated. We have to show up and vote. We have to understand not only do our lives depend on it, our democracy depends on it, and all other things we hold dear. So, my friends, I'm going to continue every single day of my life fighting to save lives. I only ask that you show up and vote. Thank you.
Fred, thank you so much, and thank you so much for the hope, which when you can find the hope, other people should be able to find the hope too. Thank you. And I want to just ask Destiny Holly, who is an 11th grade student activist from Philadelphia. Yay, Philly. Yay, Destiny. And, talk about what it's like right now to come of age with the reality of gun violence every day that you're navigating through the streets of Philly. And thank you for the work that you do to fight it.
Thank you. Okay, yes, so thank you for having me here as well. I'm grateful to speak. Right now, I am a junior in high school. I'm a part of the Peace and Social Justice Academy for my school, where we use our voice to uplift us and what is going on in our communities. We speak about that and we spread as much awareness about a lot of social issues, including gun violence. So what I've noticed a lot in Philly is that there's so many young people, and we've had this conversation multiple times. There's so many young people who realize the effect that gun violence has on the city and on America as a whole. A lot of times I hear that what's being said is that when we ask for change, most of the times I hear they want change for gun violence. They want stricter gun laws, and because they see that people are getting killed all the time. Um, a while ago in October, we had a meeting with the MLK school. I mean, with officials at the MLK school to discuss gun violence. And there, I talked about how it affects the young people like as much as the older people, and it's not just the adults who realize it, it's also the young people who realize what's going on in our communities in America as well. I talked about how I feel as though that the education system is what's really important at hand, um, as well as stricter gun laws, but the education system because that targets our youth the most. And the more time we spend educating our youth about these issues, the more time we spend to reverse, well, not reverse the damage, but the more time we spend to make amends to the damage and discontinue the traditional violence in America, in our country, and in our cities. I wasn't even fully aware of the amount of killings that happened just recently. I didn't know that like about 2 months ago we was at the 400, about 450 mark, and then now that we're up to 530 about that, that's just crazy. That's like what? That's a lot of killings within 2 months. So I feel as though that having this meeting is very important. I'm very glad to be here to represent the young people in my community because we see it too. We go through it, we experience it. We seeing this daily on social media. We have people, adults, who support like gun violence and carrying guns and stuff like that. And it passes on to our youth and they continue this thing. They continue the violence. So I think when we target the education system, when we acknowledge that there's adults who are not good role models to the youth, when we acknowledge that the youth, we need mentoring, we need job readiness skills, we need to be taught about these things, we need to be educated about these things. When we acknowledge that and really push for that, then that's when we can start to see changes as well. When we target our government system as well and pushing for these gun laws and pushing for more awareness about this within our government because they're not out here in Philly, they're not out here in these schools dealing with these things. They're at a different position, seeing it from the outside. But people who are in, we go through these things almost daily. We see these things almost daily. We hear about these things almost daily, and it's very draining on the person. It's draining on the mental. So we need to target our government system and making sure that we're heard and making sure that they see our perspective and try to work with us and get these stricter gun laws so we can prevent anybody from just having guns. And we also need to make sure that there's less illegal, never mind. So when we look into that and we target our youth, educate them, mentor them, be there for them, you know, then we can see those changes.
My mother used to have with me all the time. It was from your lips to God's ears. And as you were talking, Destiny, I kept on thinking from your lips to God's ears. Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing to actually do this work to, with our youth, with our kids, with your colleagues, with your peers. And we need to do that around the country. So thank you, Destiny.
Thank you.
And the final, before we take questions, the final speaker, who, again, I don't, like Fred, I don't really, I'm just in awe of you, Abby, and that every single day you work to make sure that our kids are okay, and that you do it in all sorts of different ways, both by teaching, but by also the work that you're doing with us in the union in terms of gun violence measures, but also every single day that you took what happened and and it didn't immobilize you. I don't understand that kind of level of strength and ability. But remember meeting you a few days after Sandy Hook, and I'm just so honored to call you a friend and a colleague. And I love some of the new things you're starting to do with some of your colleagues as well. But so take it from here. But particularly since it's just been the anniversary of Sandy Hook, tell us, just like Fred did, tell us what we need to do, but tell us what we need to hear.
Thank you, Randy, for your very kind words and for recognizing the 9th year mark of the tragedy in Newtown, and for your dedication to this issue, and for including me to speak tonight at this really important town hall with these incredible activists. It's very humbling to speak with you all. If you would have told me 9 years ago, after the horror that unleashed on my beloved town and school, that this would still be happening, that gun violence would still be impacting Americans at this alarming rate, literally everywhere one can go in the United States, I wouldn't have believed it. How can we accept this reality? Freedom, the Second Amendment, fine, but at what cost? At what responsibility? Why not responsibility? We need, at a minimum, a federal background checks law on all gun sales, including online sales, a federal safe storage law we need to pass, like we've talked about today, Build Back Better, so community violence intervention groups will get the funding they need for vital programming. We need to listen to Fred, Jerry, and Destiny, and to the teachers across the country whose students are impacted by gun violence. Right now, in classrooms in every town, in every state, kids are struggling because of the impact of gun violence cast upon them, or their families, or their friends. Suicide by gun, domestic violence, unintentional shootings, threats by gun, anxiety, and fear. This all affects learning. After surviving the shooting at Sandy Hook School, some of my students would fall asleep on me during morning meeting. Some were unable to focus, unable to comprehend the work. They were unable to calm down. And even after 9 years, after hearing about the Oxford high school shooting, that horrendous shooting 2 weeks ago, one of my surviving students, who ran for her life on the day of our shooting when she was 7, texted me, now 16, and said, I had to take off school today because my brain has been nothing but school shootings all week. Children across the country are frustrated and angry. And as our Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, has stated in his recent report, mental health challenges in children, adolescents, and young adults are real and they are widespread. And he refers to gun violence as one of the culprits. The onus of this public health crisis must not rest on the shoulders of young people who hear endless stories about gun violence, endure traumatic drills, are afraid due to threats, or who are never the same when they experience gun violence or lose a family member or friend. Teachers across the country, including those from Newtown and Parkland, send our love and support to teachers who endured the horrific tragedy in Michigan. Like we did, I'm thinking some may be struggling to reimagine entering the school again or the classroom and wondering how they can write lesson plans. What are they going to say to their students when they're asked, like-minded, what if this happens again? Teachers, we take on vicarious trauma from our students, or if we're personally affected ourselves, we might struggle too. And some of these effects can make working difficult or maintaining relationships difficult. Teachers have had quite a run since the onset of the COVID pandemic. We were lauded as heroes when we were on the front lines of it before the vaccine. And then we were vilified for teaching history and wanting students to stay safe by wearing masks. Now add that there's been a 30% increase in firearm purchases since the onset of COVID-19, and that over 5 million children live in homes with unsecured, unlocked guns. We have a lot of work to do. Shout out to the community violence interruption folks and gun violence prevention groups and survivors of gun violence out there who share their stories to affect change. And to all of you out there who are watching this, who are voting for gun safety candidates, and those of you who are pushing your school districts to educate families about safe storage and engaging with friends and family about storing firearms safely. Teachers stand alongside you all. We demand and envision a safer country from gun violence.
Thank you so much, Abby. So I know I'm supposed to do questions right now. I'm just trying to give myself a little bit of a breath here because I just want to both scream and cry, but I think we got to vote, and we have to do the kind of activism that we know just kind of connects the overwhelming numbers of Americans with, who believe in these common sense measures like, federal background checks and safe storage. And we got to figure out ways that we connect so that we, the people, can get the Congress to vote for what we, the people, believe in. But that's, that word voting 2 or 3 times, like electing people who then vote for the things that we, the people, want and need, like storage rules or safe storage provisions, as well as the background checks. These are overwhelmingly popular. And let me just say for the people who are watching, then I'm going to throw out a couple of questions. Over 100,000 members of the AFT safely own and keep guns. Some hunt, target shoot, some even collect exotic 17th century muskets. All of that is fine. All of that is great. That's their right. But everyone has a moral and legal obligation to keep their weapons safely locked and stored away, especially during the holiday season, especially now with all the triggering that we've had already. Can you imagine what these holidays are going to do in terms of triggering? No pun intended. So what can people do? And I'm going to keep everybody unmuted and just we're not so big that we can that everybody can answer if they want. What can people do who are listening to help spread the message of gun safety in their own communities? What can they do? Destiny, do you want to try to start us with that one? Because what you said about kids were so great, and then I would love all 4 of you to answer on this one.
Yes. Can you repeat the question?
Unmiked, and now I was muted. What can people do to help spread that message of gun safety in their own communities? You were talking so much about how we mentor kids and
Yes.
how we should, your activism. So that's why I wanted to start with you.
Okay, well, definitely I would say through programs at our school, because, and for my instance, what we do at the Peace and Social Justice Academy, we make like news reports of certain topics. So one of them was gun violence, and I'm pretty sure these news reports will be broadcasted to the District of Philadelphia. So it's not just at our school, it's at multiple schools. There can also be like marches of young people. We also do things like that at our school. In areas, marches about gun violence, and that will, of course, gain attention as well. Also, speaking about it in on your platforms as well. Like if you have social media and stuff like that, you can speak about it there, and also just speaking about it with people among yourselves and talking to your friends, talking to your family about it. That's what I do. And so by doing this, you're spreading it individually. You're getting more people aware about the topic, which makes people more intrigued, more passionate about it. And then in that case, they want to be a part and be a help as well, which is what I want to be.
Destiny, you are an example of why I am so proud of our nation's kids.
Thank you.
Because you're welcome. You used the word that I think sums it up: speak, talk to one another, not at one another. What happens? This is an issue where one side for so many years was so loud and bellicose that they dominated the language on this. But when we start to talk, all of a sudden people realize we kind of agree. That's not unreasonable. And wait, I can be a gun owner and still stand for gun safety. That's not unreasonable. So it's speaking, it's talking, it's using your social media platforms, it's writing op-eds. These things all matter. But this is an issue that for too many years was dominated by loud rhetoric. And what I think we're realizing, 90% of Americans support background checks, right? The majority of them, gun owners support background checks. The majority of gun owners agree with the notion that we should lock up weapons. So let's speak. Gun safety doesn't mean people showing up at people's homes in lab coats to remove all the weapons. That's not what it is. But we need to talk. We need to speak. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Can I also add that, like you said, with the speaking, it's not about, you know, a voice overpowering the other. It's a discussion because when you get multiple people involved, and you allow them to have a voice and you allow them to say their piece, then it makes more room for a common ground for people to agree on these things and progression to happen.
That's so true, and it's so the heart of education as well, and it's the heart of democracy, to give people agency and to do it for young people, and not expect, and not and to really engage in a way that we see young people as not just going through school, but as real people who have whose future is ahead of them, and they have a right to have safe streets. Anybody else? Jerry, Abby, you want to add to this? You're on mute, Jerry.
Thank you. I want to say that I certainly agree with Destiny and Fred. Fred earlier talked about the power of the vote, and Destiny took the words out of my mind about talking about the issue, that we really have a responsibility to do more than to talk when a incident occurs in our community, to say to a friend, a family member, or a neighbor, oh, that was just awful about that shooting. Today, I shared with you earlier that there was a 13-year-old shot here in the city. Well, we've got to do more. We've got to do more. We've got to talk about it, just as Destiny described, to our friends, our family, our community, but we've got to do more. We've got to talk to the elected officials or the candidates running for election. And we need to make this an issue, a really big public issue. And Randy, as you pointed out, the polls are on our side. Most Americans agree with the positions that we are taking, but we can't just read the poll and do nothing. We've got to take it another step farther now in order to make sure that we're electing people who are going to represent our positions. And I think that's something that we've missed doing, and we have to do that. We just can't let it be an incident happened on Wednesday and forget about it on Thursday or Friday. We've got to go another step farther.
Yeah, and I was thinking that that gun violence is such a multi-layered problem. So there's not just one form of it. So I think, I mean, Destiny, you really said it first here, that having this conversation, even if it's uncomfortable, and it shouldn't be uncomfortable. I think the people who don't want gun safety laws passed want to make it as uncomfortable as possible. They want it to be a polarized issue. They want it to be um, they want it to be a partisan issue, which it really isn't. So it should be kind of part of that everyday conversation. Like, say, my daughter is going over to Destiny's house. I might call Destiny's mother, easier to text her and say, do you guys have guns? And hey, if you do, are they locked? Are they loaded? Who has the key? I mean, because we say, hey, my daughter is allergic to peanuts. So could you just like not have peanut products around? So it doesn't have to be this like super scary conversation to have. And I know that this is, as the holidays, I know Randy talked about this too, like you're about to go to somebody's house, maybe family members who you don't know if they're vaccinated, you don't know if they're boosted. So those are uncomfortable conversations, but people are having them. People are saying you have to have proof of a negative test. So why not throw in there a conversation? Because it's unintentional shootings too are just so tragic. I mean, they're all tragic, but I think, like Jerry, you were saying, like we shouldn't only talk about this when there is a mass shooting that happens to grip the media to, keep the headlines going for 2 days, which is super unusual now.
I mean, this actually brings me to a couple of other questions, but I think what you just said, Abby, in terms of like everybody, if we actually started doing this more repeatedly, like having I mean, I know, look, we just did, my father, we just unveiled my father's stone. He died a couple of years ago. We did a unveiling, which in the Jewish tradition, you do pretty much like once, a year. This was 2 years. But we had people back at my sister's house afterwards. And we did say in the paperless post, you got to be vaccinated, come back to the house. I mean, that's now part and parcel what we did. When we had people for Thanksgiving, we said, everybody's going to do a rapid test beforehand. So we're doing these things. Your point is we're doing these things. We can say, you got guns in the locked up and things like that. You can do it. And I think that's a good idea. It will create understanding and an acknowledgement that this is part and parcel of how we keep each other safe. So that's really smart.
And don't be afraid to have that conversation. Kids are shooting kids every single day right now because someone left a gun unsecured.
Yeah.
You're in Connecticut. You have to know my dear friends, Kristen and Mike Sung, okay? And their beautiful son, just within a month of Jamie being killed, went to a friend's house to play. But the dad left a weapon unsecured, and Ethan was shot and killed. It should be, if we're going to trust our children to go to other people's homes, just like we would ask about the peanuts, just like we would ask about the vaccination or other safety risks, we should ask about this.
And it could be one of the things we can do as a teachers, as a nurse union, as a teachers union, is we can just have this as part of our tips. We can say that this is, so we can normalize this as, look, we got to ask these questions. And so let me ask you. I mean, you said this earlier, Fred, but I'm going to ask Abby the question, because I'm sure you get this all the time, Abby, which is, nothing has changed since Sandy Hook. Will anything ever change? And Fred gave us, I think, a really wonderful answer. But how do you answer that question? Because I'm sure you get it all the time. You're on mute.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Um,
Something new that has come into our vernacular all the time. You're on mute. Please go on mute.
I mean, it was utterly crushing when we didn't pass background checks, universal background checks, after the tragedy at Sandy Hook. And it's just absolutely shocking. And although it's definitely deflating to think that we might, I don't know, I hope we get it, but we might not. As Fred was saying, like, you're just like, you think this is the best scenario we could possibly have for getting federal change passed. But I don't know. But I do know that a lot has changed in these 9 years. And that is that this epidemic is front and center. There's not one candidate out there who can come out on a platform without clearly stating where he or she stands on this issue. Whereas it used to be kind of like you had to search and ask a question, you might get some kind of roundabout answer because everybody was afraid of the NRA. And I mean, granted, they still are powerful, but not quite as powerful as they used to be. And I think we, as my beloved senator and gun safety champion Chris Murphy said on the Senate floor after the Michigan tragedy, he said that this gun violence prevention movement is a critical social movement. I don't have his quote exactly, but what he said was, this is a movement that has millions of people at its back, and that if you're not there yet, get on the train, because this is happening everywhere. It's pervasive, but be part of this movement. And I know there are people obviously working, we're on the shoulders of many before us who've been working tirelessly on this issue in every community. But we are powerful. We have a lot of, I love the fact, people used to say, well, there's one, or people still do probably, there's one NRA, and why are there so many gun violence prevention movements? Because it's all intersectional. I mean, the fact that my union, a teachers union, is so involved in this issue is really so important. And look, you're having these town halls on it. So it affects everyone, everywhere, at the workplace and school. So they're not going to be able to calm us down to stop us, because we are everywhere. We are asking the questions. We are coming to the table and saying, these drills are not okay. What are you telling parents about threats? What is the plan for if there's a perpetrator who enters the school? So I think we're unstoppable as a collective voice, but we're coming at it from lots of different angles. And also, everything is much more transparent. If you are a candidate, if you are running for office and you get money from the NRA, it's going to be known. It's going to be tweeted about. You're not going to be able to hide from it. I do think a lot has changed.
Love that. I'm going to ask two more questions, and you touched on this, Abby, in terms of the how we prepare these days in terms of safety in schools, and the kind of drills that we have. So let me ask this: how should we be promoting, safety in schools and workplaces that help prepare in case of a firearm incident, without the trauma or re-traumatizing students, staff, and employees, which is what we seem to be doing right now with the drills. So, any ideas? We have at least three educators on here, and and at least, so I'll say, two panelists who are educators, two activists, and one student. So, what do you think we should be doing? Because it feels like the drills are just really over the top.
Listen, I think we've already been talking about one of the things, which is highlighting safe storage.
Yep.
That's front and center. Um, and I agree, the drills, I don't think they're working. I think they're traumatizing people, and they're normalizing the risk. They're normalizing the idea that we should plan to be shot. And I have a fundamental issue with that. But the reality is, we do need to have ideas on what to do. Safe storage is the biggie. I was actually on a Zoom earlier today with law enforcement, and we were talking about this. And they were talking about how they need to do a better job with that internally. And I said, police officers should be front and center, over and above everyone else, on gun safety and talking about safe storage. Because, listen, there's probably, I mean, when you think of what police officers put themselves into, they are at daily risk of shootings. And so this idea of safe storage being such a lifesaver for all of us in all these different settings, that is front and center, number one. I'm not sure what the thing is to replace drills. I'm just not that smart, but I know something needs to, because they're just traumatizing our kids and normalizing it. And I think we do need to do a better job of listening to what's happening. And when we are seeing or hearing something, having the training in place to make sure that information is being properly transmitted and acted upon before the threat is carried out.
Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you, Fred.
Go right ahead, Destiny.
Thank you. So I agree with Fred and I agree with Abby about this. However, I do want to mention that, like, if we're teaching children, students drills, we have to keep in mind if the school shooter is a student, then they also learn that drill as well. So it is important to target like signs of these things, because with some of the school shooters, like the one that took place in Florida, the person had already posted pictures about it or made threats about it through social media. And so we see these signs. I think a lot of people see signs like that and they don't take them as serious, or they see these students who might be off put and um, like isolated, I guess. And a lot of people will automatically say, okay, this is a result of bullying, but some people have serious mental issues that aren't taken into consideration, aren't taken as seriously. Things aren't being done at home to prevent or help aid that things don't get violent with that person. So we have to take into consideration that if we're going to help and with these drills, I think it is important that we go over safety measures, because this is a pattern in America, and it may be a while until this is something that we've conquered. So it is important that we go over some form of drills and making sure that we have some safety code in place and that it's actually effective. But it's also important, as Fred said, that we check in with the children and stuff like that as well. And when we see signs of mental issues or behaviors that are like that could be problematic, then checking with that child and making sure that they're getting the help that they need.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Thank you,
Yes,
Jerry.
yes. I don't think that anybody can say it any better than what Destiny just did. I think that it's so important for us to make sure that our buildings, our school buildings, are well resourced with professionals who are able to talk to children and hear information like that which Destiny just shared with us in order to have them be a part of the solution and how it is that we are going to establish policies that we'll live by every day. And, in a district like Philadelphia, we're under resourced and there are not enough adults in the buildings to really form important relationships with children so that children are able to alert adults when they see information on social media that should not be there and is going to be harmful for everyone. When they hear classmates say things or they just see the signs, the children know what they're looking at. Many times we, the educators, don't know because we don't keep up with the fast paced lives of young people and the things that change so. And so as I said earlier in my comments, we need to make sure that we have enough counselors and social workers and other individuals, adults who are in school, and not they do not have to be all professional certified people. Our classroom assistants are very knowledgeable people who many times live in the school community and they know what's going on in the community and they bring that information into the school. Let's all really work together and give them the avenues to be able to share that information for the safety of all of us. Schools, I always say, I want them to go back to the days when I was a student at West Philly High, and every day was wonderful. I couldn't wait to get there. And we didn't have the kind of violence that we face and that our children face today.
So I'm looking at the time and I could spend hours with you, but I know I promised everybody, or we promised everybody, and everybody's watching, a hard stop at the hour lesson, at the hour moment. So I'm going to just so it's 3 minutes in the East Coast. It's 3 minutes to 8. So I just want to say a couple of things here. Number one, Destiny, I wish I was still an 11th grade social studies teacher, and I wish I had you in my class. It would make my class so much more robust in terms of your your insights are just amazing. So we all have become Teen Destiny. I understand that it's trending on Twitter already. So thank you for being with us today. And I want to say thank you for all of you. This is one of the more robust conversations where people just built on each other's ideas, and to have students and teachers and activists together, that's how we're going to change the world. So I just really want to say thank you for just being so moving and inspiring, and doing what Fred said, which is speaking, not being silent, taking a risk, talking to each other, talking to everybody who's watching this. And frankly, the solutions are in front of us. Safe storage of guns, background checks, having the resources in schools so that we can look, we as schools people are not going to be able to take on all the social media companies. I do hope there are changes that get done in terms of Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and things like that. But if we had more guidance counselors and nurses, if we had more of the ways in which kids could have the kind of trusting relationships with adults that we've just developed here in the last hour or so. We'll all be, we're all could be on each other's emails now. Those resources are really important, what Jerry said. And the other thing that's really important is what Abby said and Fred said about the kind of things don't normalize stuff or other things should be normalized. Asking questions before kids go to each other's homes. That should be normalized. What shouldn't be normalized is these kind of assault drills. And the last thing, what Fred said, vote, vote, vote. Because it is different, as Abby said. 9, 10 years ago, the moment that you did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the moment you talked about any of these issues, you just get blasted and bullied and by, how dare you? Yes, we still get all that stuff, but look how much else is out there. Look how much is out there in terms of trying to help make sure that everyone is safe on streets, every kid safe and welcoming in schools. So things have changed. So I take a lot of hope from this conversation. I just want to, before I say goodbye to everybody, I just want to see if all of you have one last word as we enter into the holiday season to the folks who are watching us on YouTube or Facebook. Abby, I'll start with you. I'll end this time with Destiny.
Well, first of all, it's just such an honor to talk with you all and to be among such incredible activists. And I share Randy's thoughts about having Destiny in his class, because I think that would be awesome. You must make your teachers very proud and your family. I think just ending with, having, just encouraging people to have these hard conversations, and they're definitely not fun. Try it maybe on texting first, but I do think that they're so important. And every time you do, your heart might race a little bit, but then you have the power to make the decision if it's a safe situation for you. So I think just have a safe holiday season, both with one pandemic and the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Fred.
First, thank you for including me tonight. I'm truly honored to be with you all, and this was a wonderful panel. I'm just going to say this. Beyond wishing you all a wonderful holiday season, it is my ask that you all never stay silent and that you vote. Your life depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Jerry.
Thank you. I've enjoyed being a part of this panel this evening as well. It's been a wonderful opportunity, and I am so proud of you, Destiny, that you are just representing Philadelphia and just showing the very finest of our students. And so I am just very proud that you're with us today. But I share Fred's sentiments that when we vote, we win. We have an issue that is so important for our society, for the next generation that we're teaching, that we must make sure that we elect individuals who are going to put laws in place that we want. And we must do it, because if we don't do it, we're going to lose the franchise. We're going to lose public education. We're going to have streets that we will not be able to control. We have to do something about the gun violence. And the way to ensure that we do it is by electing people who believe the way that we do. And the polls show that most Americans feel the same way that we do. Thank you, Randy, for having this town hall tonight.
Thanks, Jerry. And Destiny.
Okay, I want to also say thank you guys for all the compliments and support. I'm very thankful that I had a chance to speak here and represent the young people. And just so you guys know, to let y'all know that we do care about these issues, we do see it, and we do want to acknowledge it. I agree with Abby earlier because she said that gun violence comes in many forms. It comes in suicide, it comes in homicide, it comes in school shootings, it comes in violence in our impoverished neighborhoods. It's literally everywhere. So I agree with that. And I also agree with Fred about speaking and using your voice in any form you can just to be a help. That is a really good thing to do. So as long as we acknowledge the issue at hand, which is what we're doing, and then we look at the root causes and multiple factors and we consider them all, we take these conversations to our people who are elected, people in the government, secretaries, presidents, Congress. We take these issues to them and we vote on people who are going to allow us to have a voice and actually work towards these issues.
I'm trying to unmute myself. That, what you all said, Abby, Fred, Jerry, Destiny, it's a really wonderful way to kind of end this year's town halls. This is our last one for 2021. Hopefully 2022 will bring everyone who's listening in to Abby, to Fred, to Jerry, to Destiny, your families, your friends, your communities. I wish you and everyone else who's watching just a good holiday, a restful, a peaceful, a fulfilling, a healthy holiday, where hopefully our aspirations not only are in front of us, but are attainable and reachable, and that we solve the problems that we can solve as Americans, including gun violence in all of its forms. So thank you, everybody, for being with us tonight. We have a bunch of new things that are on the horizon from the AFT, including Reading Opens the World, where we're going to give out 1 million books to our kids all across America and really do lots of things with parents and with professional development on reading instruction. And we're going to do a lot more things over the course of the next year. But number one is keeping people, our kids, our families, our communities safe and welcome. And the best way to do that is let's make sure that if you're a gun owner, store your guns, and that we keep on fighting for safe, common sense gun prevention. Thanks all of you for everything you've done to date and for everything tonight. Happy New Year.